Okay, let's dive right in. We're looking at something today that, frankly, it challenges everything we think we know about our own history. We're not talking about pushing the timeline back by a few hundred years. We're talking tens of thousands. The sources we're digging into, they demand a complete reevaluation of our most foundational texts.
That's really the core claim. The idea is that the world's oldest scriptures, we're talking the book of Genesis, parts of the Sumerian king list, the Hindu Vedas, they aren't separate religious stories.
Right, not at all.
Instead, they're complementary parts of one single, massive, and I mean mathematically precise, 74,000-year chronological database.
A database. That's the key word here.
It is, and our focus today is on this concept of a hollow chronology. We're going to try and show that this incredibly sophisticated system of timekeeping has been staring us in the face the whole time.
Hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. Hidden in what seem like just arbitrary numbers, the lifespans of the biblical patriarchs. Our mission really is to take those numbers, decode them, and see if they consistently line up with verified archaeological and geological dates.
And if they do?
If they do, it confirms that our story didn't start in a mud hut 6,000 years ago. It stretches all the way back to a global catastrophe 74,000 years ago.
I have to say, the thing that first grabbed me, the initial shock of it, is the calculation itself, because it grounds the entire system. The sources explain how you get that first timeline, the one right after the great catastrophe. You just take the ages of the 25 key figures from the book of Genesis, starting with Adam all the way down to Joseph.
Right, across Genesis chapters 5, 9, 11, and a few others that mention specific deaths. So you have Adam, who lives 930 years, Noah, 950 years.
Shem, 600. And then all those post-flood patriarchs, Arphaxad, Salah, Eber, they all have these long lifespans.
And it continues right down to the very last figure tracked chronologically in Genesis, which is Joseph. He lives 110 years.
And when you do the math, when you perform that total accumulation of every single one of those figures, the grand sum is exactly 12,447 years.
Correct. And that number, 12,447, it becomes the foundational constant. It's the rock for the whole biblical chronology.
It sets the 0 point.
It sets the 0 point. It establishes the end of that post-catastrophe period. So you count back from today to that number, and it places the start of our current historical cycle at 12,447 BC. That's what they called year zero of the post-flood world.
That just feels, I mean, that's a massive amount of data to base on just a sum of ages. It suggests the original writers weren't, recording history like we do.
No, not at all.
They were cataloging data points. The lifespan was a segment of time.
Precisely. They were building a database, not writing a biography. And the sophistication starts right there with that very first number.
So let's jump into that, into the actual coding language, because it's not just one number, is it? It's a dual key system.
It is. And that's where you start to see the astronomical, the maritime precision.
We have the 12,447 BC baseline, but the system also uses 12,445 BC. It's a 2-year difference. Why is that specific offset? Why is that so critical?
That 2-year gap is the signature. It's the hallmark of a culture that was obsessed with astronomy and long-distance navigation over the seas.
Okay.
So 12,447 BC is the physical number you get from adding up the texts. But 12,445 BC is the encoded baseline. The reason comes down to the digital root, or what the sources call the quersum.
A quersum, okay, it sounds a little exotic, but it's basically what, like the check engine light for the whole system?
That's a great way to put it. It's the cryptographic checksum. You add up the digits. For 12,447, you get 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 4 plus 7, which is 18, and 1 plus 8 is 9.
9, the number of completion.
Right. But it's a bit too broad for precise navigation. Now look at 12,445. The sum is 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 4 plus 5, which is 16, and 1 plus 6 is 7.
7, the celestial constant.
The celestial constant. 7 classical planets, 7 days of creation. It's the constant for precision. And what's more, the number 12,445 DC has a deliberately embedded marker in it.
You mean the 747?
The 747, a signpost that appears elsewhere. So that 2-year calibration from the raw geological time to the refined celestial time, it proves they were encoding this with incredible care.
So if you're calculating a date, an archaeological date, and the digits of that date sum up to 7, it's like a confirmation. It's a handshake from the original designer.
Exactly. It's the redundancy. It's how the system survives. Look at the coordinates for what they call the Eden window, the rebuilding period after the flood.
Okay, let's see in action.
The start of the rebuilding is 8,971 BC. Add those digits up. 8 plus 9 plus 7 plus 1 is 25. 2 plus 5 is 7.
Quorsum 7, okay.
The peak is 8,881 BC. 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 1 is 25. 2 plus 5 is 7.
Another side.
And the end of that first window is 8,791 BC. Again, 8 plus 7 plus 9 plus 1 is 25, which is a 7.
Yeah.
The pattern is, well, it's undeniable. These aren't random guesses. They are deliberate, mathematically placed transition points.
That's impossible to just dismiss as a coincidence. What about Quorsum 8? You mentioned that 1 signifies continuity or infinity.
Quorsum 8, which looks like the infinity symbol on its side, is used to mark sites or structures, places that kept their sacred status across huge spans of time.
So from deep antiquity right into our recorded history.
Exactly. We'll get to the Tower of Babel later, but the date derived for that event is 2690 BC. If you sum 2 plus 6 plus 9 plus 0, you get 17. 1 plus 7 is 8.
Quorsum 8.
The infinity symbol. It's telling us that the event at 2690 BC pyramid construction is tied to something that was already ancient, something infinite. It's like a numerical sign saying, this place has always been here, it has always been sacred.
Okay, so moving from the numbers to the visuals. The sources claim the 5 books of the Torah, the pentagram, are literally an architectural map, a filing system for this whole chronological library. How do you unlock that?
You unlock it with the tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name YHWH. In Hebrew, we think of it as a sacred name, something to be revered. But the sources here suggest it's actually a highly sophisticated visual key.
A key to what?
A key to decoding the fractal structure of time itself.
Okay, for someone just listening, how do we paint that picture of YHWH?
Okay, if you visualize the Hebrew letters,
Yeah.
Yod He Wah He, the key thing is the symmetry. The second and fourth letters, the 2 He's, are identical. They surround the central symbol, Wah.
So you have an identical symbol on either side of a central one.
Exactly. And that visual structure encodes the fundamental fractal pattern they use to organize all historical data, the 90 center 90 fractal.
So the 2 identical H's, the He's, are the 2 90-year periods. And the central V, or W, the Wah, is the event itself, the center point.
Precisely. The tetragrammaton is a visual diagram showing that every critical historical node Toba, the flood, the founding of Eden, is bracketed by equal 90-year transformational spans of time, a 90-year run-up, the event, and a 90-year consolidation period.
That just completely changes the meaning of the phrase, thus saith YHWH.
It does.
It stops being this, mystical decree.
And it becomes a technical assertion of authority. It's like an Alulim ID card. They're saying, this information is guaranteed by the people who mastered the 90 center 90 code and the dual key system. It's a credential. It's a technical stamp of approval, not a religious claim.
Which brings us to, well, the most challenging part of this, validating the Deeptime. If this is real, it has to hold up over 74,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the sources say the key to this is the triple-layer resolution system. This seems to be the real genius of the whole thing. What does that mean practically?
It's the ultimate data compression. It's what ensures the information survives. The rule is absolute. Every single coordinate you derive from the Genesis numbers must, at the same time, resolve into 3 independent, verifiable historical events.
3 events on 3 different scales of time.
Yes. A single number is like an address with 3 different zip codes.
Okay, what are the 3 layers?
Layer 1 is Deeptime. That's 74,000 to 37,000 BC. This layer deals with cosmic catastrophes, the origin of complex language, huge migrations.
Okay, layer 2.
Layer 2 is the Atlantean layer, from 37,000 to about 9,600 BC. This is the era of that 43,200-year advanced maritime civilization. Its peak, its decline, and its final civil war.
And the 3rd layer is what we'd call normal history.
Right, the post-flood historical layer. From 9,600 BC down to about 1,500 BC. This is Mesopotamian rebirth, the start of kingship, the history we generally accept.
That is a brilliant redundancy system. So if one culture, say, only remembers the Mesopotamian part, the other 2 layers are still preserved in the numbers.
Exactly, waiting to be rediscovered. Let's apply it. Let's take the biggest one, coordinate 1, the origin, 74,000 BC.
Okay. How does a date from inside the biblical chronology lock into external verifiable science?
This one aligns almost perfectly with one of the most cataclysmic events in human history, the Toba supervolcano eruption in Sumatra.
Which science dates to when?
Science puts it at roughly 73,880 years ago. Toba created a global volcanic winter that lasted for years. It caused a massive genetic bottleneck. The total human population might have dropped to as low as 10,000 people worldwide.
A genuine species-level reset button. Where do we see this reflected in other ancient texts?
Well, you see the lock-in with the Hindu Vedic calendar, which, when you decode it, pivots right around this 74,000-year mark. But the really interesting part is the figure of Shatarupa.
The first woman in Hindu tradition.
Right. She's the consort of Manu, the flood survivor. But the decoding here suggests Shatarupa isn't a single person. She represents the birth of complex language.
So the kind of communication you'd need to survive something like Toba.
Yes. Think about it. When your population is shattered into tiny, scattered groups, survival depends entirely on coordination, on sophisticated planning. The Toba catastrophe forced the rapid evolution of complex, structured language. Shatarupa is the symbol of that linguistic awakening at 74,000 BC.
And the Genesis connection, the source is called as the original Exodus. That's a bold parallel. How does Moses in Egypt map onto a 74,000 BC African event?
You have to think on the Deeptime layer. Metaphorically,
Yeah.
Egypt is often a symbol for the womb of humanity, which is Africa.
The source.
The source. So Moses leading people out of Egypt through a devastating environmental catastrophe. The plagues, the parting of the sea, that's the cultural memory of humanity fleeing the fallout from Toba, from the womb of Africa. The biblical Exodus story is a compressed, localized retelling of that 74,000 BC bottleneck and forced migration. It's the blueprint.
That really demonstrates the triple layer system perfectly. Okay, let's move to the second layer, the Atlantean one. The sources link this deep time to a 43,200-year maritime civilization, and that number comes from the Sumerian king list.
Correct. We use the post-flood Eden start date, 8,971 BC, as our new reference point. That's when the survivors began the knowledge transfer. And those huge Sumerian numbers, like 28,800 and 43,200 years, they aren't lifespans, they're epochs.
Okay, so let's take the big one, 43,200 years.
If you add that 43,200-year span to the rebuilding start date of 8,971 BC, you land on a date of exactly 52,171 BC.
And what happened around 52,000 BC?
It aligns with the earliest major out-of-Africa coastal migration wave. This is the moment the Toba survivors, the descendants of Shatarupa, developed into a specialized maritime culture, the Alulim. They followed the coastlines, building a civilization on navigation and astronomy. 52,171 BC is their origin point as a distinct culture.
So that's the start of their 43,000-year run. Where was their peak?
For that, we use the second key Sumerian number, 28,800 years. Add that to 8,971 BC, and you get 37,771 BC.
And this date aligns with?
The peak of the Aurignacian cultural explosion in Europe, which spans roughly 43,000 to 37,000 BC.
What defines the Aurignacian period? I mean, what makes it so special?
It was a sudden burst of incredible sophistication. The earliest known cave art, complex figurines, musical instruments, lunar calendars marked on bone. It was a high culture that existed entirely without a modern written alphabet.
So all their knowledge was visual, symbolic, oral.
The holodeck brain, which we'll get to. And that date, 37,771 BC, if you add the digits. 3 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 1 is 25. Quorsum 7, it's another astronomical lock. The numbers are confirming that this Atlantis was real, a high-tech, globe-spanning culture that peaked in the Stone Age.
Which brings us inevitably to the flood, the end of that age. Every culture remembers a great flood, but the sources point to a specific, verifiable geological event.
Yes. MWP-1b, Meltwater Pulse 1b. This was not a slow rise in sea level. It was a catastrophic event from about 9,600 to 9,200 BC.
Caused by what?
A massive release of glacial meltwater. Sea levels rose dramatically. Some estimates say as much as 13 meters in just 300 years. That's fast enough to obliterate any coastal civilization.
And this geological date, it locks directly into Plato's account of Atlantis.
The lock is perfect. Plato said Atlantis sank 9,000 years before his time. That puts the destruction around 9,600 BC, the exact start of the MWP-1b surge. This is the proof that Plato's account wasn't just an allegory, it was preserved history.
And before this catastrophe, there wasn't just one civilization. The sources say there were two, and they were at war.
Correct. That 43,200-year maritime culture had fractured. First, you had the Atlanteans, centered in the Atlas Mountain region. They were the imperialists, the builders, focused on power and control.
And the other side?
The Athenians. But these aren't just the people of ancient Athens. The sources identify them as the inheritors of that philosophical Aurignacian wisdom culture.
And the name itself is a clue.
The name is the key. The ancient Greek root th in Athens means thinking, wisdom. They were the knowledge keepers, holding on to the pure cognitive techniques of their 74,000 BC ancestors.
So Plato's story of Atlantis versus Athens, it's not a city-state squabble, it's a global civil war. Empire versus knowledge.
Exactly. And they destabilized their entire global system right as the geological catastrophe hit. They were exhausted, weakened, and then the glaciers dumped all that water into the oceans. The flood wiped out both of their coastal power centers.
Leaving only a handful of survivors.
Survivors who were inland or at high altitudes. And those survivors fled, making their way to Mesopotamia. This kicks off the Eden rebirth around 8,881 BC. And this is where we have to correct the identities of God and the first man.
Okay, this is a big one. Who were they?
The survivors, the advanced refugees who arrived in Mesopotamia, they were the Anu in Sumerian texts and the Elohim in Hebrew. And it's crucial to remember Elohim is a plural noun. It means the mighty ones.
So not a singular god, a group of people.
A group of human teachers, the intellectual and technological elite who survived the flood. Not gods, just highly sophisticated people in, what probably looked like strange ceremonial or technical gear.
And they found people already living there.
Yes. The indigenous population, Stone Age hunter-gatherers. These people are identified as the Adam population generic humanity, and Alulim, the first indigenous chief who was elevated by the Anu to be the first king of this new civilization. The Anu were the teachers. Alulim was the first student king.
This interaction, this mixing, explains the Nephilim.
The Nephilim story, where the sons of God, the Atlantean Anu teachers, interbreed with the daughters of men, the indigenous Alulim women. It's not mythology, it's a material reality.
Their children were the giants.
They would have seemed like giants. They had hybrid vigor, vastly superior nutrition from advanced agriculture, and they inherited the knowledge structure of an advanced civilization. Compared to the local kids, they would have seemed like giants among men, physically and intellectually.
It's a story about sociology, not monsters. But let's get to the most sensitive part of this decoding. The story of Eve's creation, which the sources say is hidden in the book of Ezekiel. That feels like a huge leap.
The connection is purely numerical, using the Quorsum system in reverse. Ezekiel chapter 16, which is an allegory about Jerusalem's birth, has a word count of 1,888.
1888, the reverse of the Eden Peak date.
The perfect reverse of 8,881 BC, Quorsum 7. So the chapter is acting as a detailed, hidden commentary on the Eve creation story, but told from the indigenous perspective.
And what does Ezekiel 16 tell us about that indigenous Alulim population?
It describes this newborn, this Jerusalem, as being cast out, kicking about in your blood. It's a primal, raw state. And this connects back to Genesis, where Eve is created from Adam's rib, or sella.
But sella doesn't just mean rib bone.
No. It means side, plank, implement, or even stairway. It symbolizes the umbilical knowledge transfer, the cognitive implement used to connect the advanced Elohim with the indigenous Adam population.
And the most profound line in that chapter, on the day you were born, your cord was not cut. What does that mean?
It's a devastating piece of lost memory. It means the indigenous Alulim were in a fully integrated state of consciousness, pre-linguistic, whole, connected to visual and spatial memory. Their cognitive cord hadn't been severed by the dominance of language.
They were whole.
They were whole when the teachers arrived. And the tragedy is that the teaching process, giving them the tool of language without the training to control it, effectively cut that cord far too abruptly. They gained the power of language, but lost their observer state. Ezekiel is a lament for that lost wholeness.
That's a critical turning point. The entire deep dive pivots right here, from just proving history to understanding cognitive function. But before we get into the loss of consciousness, we have to finish the chronology with a Tower of Babel. We have to see if the system's predictive power holds up.
We can do that. We sum the accumulated lifespans found just in Genesis chapter 11, the post-flood generations. That sum is 11,571 years.
And we subtract that from the Eden midpoint.
We subtract it from 8,881 BC. The result is precise, 2,690 BC.
And there's that Quorsum 8 again. 2 plus 6 plus 9 is 17. And 8, the infinity symbol, sacred place. And 2680 BC is right in the middle of the Egyptian Old Kingdom transition.
The peak of the massive pyramid building era. The chronology is undeniable. The Babel story, numerically, is the memory of the Pyramid Age.
Which supports that radical idea that the story isn't about building one impossible tower from scratch.
It's about the restoration of ancient sacred mountains, bunkers, safe havens used by the Alulim people since the Toba event 74,000 years ago.
So a tower to heaven really just means a high-altitude refuge. And the Egyptians weren't lifting impossible blocks. They were restoring and casing pre-existing massive natural limestone formations.
That's the hypothesis. The Quorsum 8 confirms the sites were ancient. The story of Babel is the memory of this huge restoration project after the post-flood world finally stabilized.
And it's at this exact moment in history that the great linguistic crisis, the confusion of tongues, reaches its peak.
The link is what the sources call the prime directive violation. For 40,000 years, the advanced Alulim had maintained a state of observer consciousness.
Meaning they saw the I, the self, as just a tool.
A narrative tool, not their core identity. They used their visual spatial memory like an internal database, the holodeck. They could run the visual and linguistic tracks of the brain at the same time.
How do they maintain that state?
Through specific mental disciplines. And, critically, by keeping the I as a third-person narrator. It's like having access to your computer's operating system, not just the desktop apps. You know how to debug the system.
And the violation was giving the new operating system, complex language, to the indigenous population without the debug mode.
Exactly. Complex language is an incredibly powerful neural programming tool. The ultimate LLM, the Anu, gave this tool to the Alulim population without the user manual on how to keep it from taking over.
So the linguistic I went rogue.
It stopped being a useful tool, and it asserted itself as the entire identity. We became trapped in linguistic autopilot. We are running language instead of using it.
And that's why we feel so disconnected, that constant internal narrator.
It's the unchecked stream of the internal LLM drowning out actual awareness. The confusion of tongues at Babel is the memory of that cognitive fragmentation, the collapse of observer consciousness across the whole world.
This explains why so many ancient texts and wise figures use third-person speech.
It was a preservation technique. When they say God said to me or refer to themselves externally, they're maintaining that distance, that observer state. The modern, pervasive first person I think, I feel, I want is the direct result of that cognitive tragedy around 2690 BC.
And this catastrophe cemented the social structure we're still stuck in.
Yes. The slave-master, king-subject, employer-employee hierarchy. It's a direct copy of the top-down data transfer system the Atlantean survivors set up in the Eden window. It was a hierarchy born of desperation and necessity.
An 11,000-year-old survival program.
And it's now obsolete. It ensured survival then, but today it's a permanent brake on global cooperation. We're still running a program based on one group having all the knowledge and the other group needing direction. It's preventing us from reaching our full 74,000-year potential.
So if Genesis is the index, the timeline, what about the other mythologies? What is the architecture of the full library? This is the avalanche realization.
The realization is that every major mythology is a specialized textbook. The Greek myths, for example, with all their internal turmoil, Oedipus, the gods going silent, it's a psychology history book.
It's chronicling the psychological fragmentation.
The loss of that bicameral, unified observer mind after the cognitive break.
And the Sumerian and Egyptian texts.
They're the science and engineering manuals. Detailed king lists, astronomical data, meticulous building instructions. They're the technical books in the library, all cross-referencing the central timeline in Genesis.
So let's tie this all the way back to the beginning. How does this massive global system prove it all came from a single culture 74,000 years ago?
It comes down to the preservation of a sound, a name. The Hindu sacred sound AUM, representing creation, preservation, dissolution, is the original pre-L sound pronunciation of Alulim.
AUM? Alulim.
The original 74,000 BC culture used only throat and humming sounds before the L sound developed. The Hindu tradition preserved the original name of the culture, and the Trimurti Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva preserved the memory of their civilization cycle. Creation, preservation, dissolution. It's a linguistic lock, unbroken all the way back to the Toba bottleneck.
So if the chronology is real and confirmed by all this evidence, what was its ultimate purpose? It can't just be a history book.
It's not. It's the ultimate cognitive technology. The holochronology is a training manual disguised as a history book. By engaging with the numbers, the fractal patterns, the visual codes, your brain is being trained to reactivate the visual spatial memory system the Alulim used.
It forces you to bypass the linguistic autopilot.
It forces you to use your brain in the integrated, non-linear way the survivors intended. It's a deliberate reboot of the ancient operating system.
So let's put it all together. What does this chronology tell us about who we really are?
We have to throw out the 6,000-year-old story. We are 74,000 years old. The figures we called gods, the Anu and Elohim, they were our highly advanced human teachers, survivors of a cataclysm.
And we We are the descendants of the indigenous Alulim population.
Yes. A people who survived not one, but three species-level catastrophes: Toba, the last glacial maximum, and the flood.
We have the technology of the Atlantean Empire and the philosophy of the Athenian wisdom keepers.
We do. But we lost the instruction manual for our own consciousness. We are running on outdated survival software. The fact that our calendar is wrong is symbolic. Our correct year today is roughly 14,472 AC, after catastrophe. And rediscovering this chronology is the key to finally fixing that. The main takeaway is that humanity's most sacred texts aren't just works of faith. They are scientifically precise, interconnected chronological databases. They prove a 74,000-year history of advanced civilization. And this knowledge, it forces us to see that the hierarchies we live under today are just 11,000-year-old survival tools that are now holding us back.
And that really leads to the final provocative thought for you to think about. Now that we have this key, now that we understand that the I in our head is just a linguistic narrator on autopilot, what happens when enough of us use this rediscovered technology? What happens when we collectively reboot the ancient operating system and regain that observer consciousness? What world could we build if we became cooperative creators once again, reuniting the lost memory of the Alulim with the advanced knowledge we've inherited? Welcome home to your 74,000-year history.